Well, here I am with the kitchen renovation. I am taking my drill and taking the doors off, taking the screws out of the door so I can go sand it and prime it and paint it. As you can see, the three drawers to the right are completely done. I have to do the fourth one, and that's what I start with the sanding process. So I go to this drawer right here and start with 80 grit sandpaper, and I am trying just to get the clear coat off of it so we can prime it and paint it, and the paint will stay on it for years to come. As you're doing the 80 grit, I go all the different directions. I just don't go with the grain. I go all different directions. And then with the 150, I do the same thing to get the scratches down to a minimum where the primer and paint will go on smooth, and that you'll have the nice finish for the front of the drawer. So here I am with the 150 now, and I am just trying to get the majority of the big scratches off of it. And then once I'm done with the drawer front, I go to the cabinet doors and I do the front and backs of both the cabinet doors, and I start with the 80 again. Of course, these door fronts has got small little crevices in them and little areas that I use my hand. As you can see, I don't use any kind of equipment with the sandpaper because I want to get into them small little crevices, and to do that I use my hand, and I just am trying to get the clear coat, like I said, off of it, and I am just going over it as much as possible to get that clear coat off. And then once I use the 80 to do that, then I get to the 150 and I go over it again and get all the scratches down to a minimum where the paint and primer will go on smooth. So here's the second door. As you can see, started off with 80 grit again, and that 80 grit is really tough, and it takes off quite a bit of that gloss, and it gets it down to where I can prime the door. So this is the front side of that door, and as you can tell, I don't really sand this fast. I sped up the video just so I can go through the video sooner. Now, once I got the doors and the drawer done, I went over and took the hinges off and found out one of the hinges for the doors is broke. So I have to wait 8 to 10 days to get that door hinge in, and so I can put it on back on the cabinet front. So now we're without a door on that corner cabinet right now until I get that hinge in. It's a special type of hinge, so I had to special order it, and it'll be in 8 to 10 days. Now I went over to the cabinet and started on the drawer front and the cabinet front, sanding it. And of course, it's the same process. You take the 80 grit and you got to go on the top and bottoms of these rails, across the face of them, and just make sure that you get all the clear coat off of them. And like I said, I like using my hands because there's different angles and crevices and stuff that most sanders will not be able to get in, and I just like using my hands so I can feel what I'm sanding, and I know what I'm sanding, and I know that I can do a good enough job just with my hand to get the gloss off so we can put the primer and paint on there. So here's the corner cabinet now. I'm just making sure that it's done well. Of course, I do all the faces and of course the top and bottoms of all the rails. Now I started with the primer, and what I did was I start with the cabinet doors, and I made sure that all the areas of the doors were filled. It doesn't have to be perfect with the primer, but it does have to be covered. And so I just went and covered the fronts of the doors. I left the back off, and of course I laid the backs back down on the cardboard that's on the floor, and that was just to prevent it from getting primer and paint onto the floor. And my wife liked that idea that I don't get paint everywhere. And of course these cabinets have been in here for at least 10 years or maybe even more. And so that golden oak is going to be nice to get rid of it because it's so out of date. And so once we're done with the doors and drawers, of course, I am putting black handles on the fronts. And so once it dries, I'll do that. But I am done with the doors and the drawer priming. So I went over to the cabinet front, and here I am putting the primer onto the cabinet front and the drawer fronts, and just covering it, like I said, just enough to get it where it covers, and it accepts the primer, and it seals it up so the paint will stick and will not be able to just rub it off or scratch it off or whatever. But the first coat doesn't have to be perfect, but when I go and do the second coat with primer, I try to make sure all the spots are covered and everything is well painted. So when you actually do the painting part, the wood will accept the paint really good, and it will last for a lifetime, really. So here I am finishing the drawer part and making sure that I'm not hitting the stove and everything. It was kind of tedious work. It's small areas, but it went on pretty well. It's very time consuming, as you can see with the sped up video, and also the cutting out of the breaks that I took in between the primer and letting it dry and then putting the second coat on and actually doing the painting. You really don't get to see all the pauses and everything that I had to do in order to let it dry and make sure that everything was done properly and dried properly before we put the next coat on. But once we got finished with the cabinets, I was just making sure on the second coat that everything was totally covered and that there was a good thick covering of primer on there, so when we went to paint, it was appropriate for it to stick to the cabinet fronts and doors and drawers. So it was a small brush that I was using because, like I said, it was some of the areas was really small, and using a big brush would not have been beneficial. So after I got to a point where I thought it was good enough, I decided to go back to the doors and the drawers of the cabinet here. This process for just this little section, excuse me, it took about 2.5 hours. So it's very time consuming, and that's pretty much without any of the breaks. This was 2.5 hours of doing the priming, sanding, and painting. And it probably was an hour or more waiting on things to dry every once in a while. So it is very time consuming, but it's very rewarding once it's done. It looks very good, and I can't wait to show you the end result for that. So I know that it takes time, but if you really want something to be rewarding and you want something to look nice, you have to take the time and put the effort into it. Now here it is. I am on the paint process now. I'm painting the fronts of the doors, and boy, did the paint really go on well. The doors look great. So did the drawers. So I'll have all 4 drawers done and the 2 cabinet doors done, and boy, they really turned out nice. Too bad that the hinge is broke where I can't put one back on. And I am not going to reveal the cabinet doors and drawers back on until I have the majority of the cabinets done, maybe the lower, all the lower cabinets done, so we can have a reveal of what actually it ended up being like. And I wanted to show you this drawer front. I was trying to get it to where you could see it. The picture didn't turn out as nice as I thought it would, but it really turned out nice. The paint really accepted on the drawer and the drawer front turned out really good. So thank you for spending the time watching my video, and I hope to catch you on the next one.